I'm Hunter with Rebel Outdoors, and I just had to drive all the way back to my house because I forgot the SD card and the camera. So today is going to be a really fun video, I think. I'm excited for it. So I've been doing a couple videos comparing like full size, some pros and cons, and you know, there's some of the little different things about this Ram 2500 that I've built out for overlanding, hunting, all that fun stuff. So I live in Michigan, and Michigan is kind of notorious for some tight trails. I have shoved this truck into places here to where on either side of the kickouts on my rear bumper, I had probably about an inch on either side. I got pin straps up the wazoo, which I don't really care about. Minimal body damage considering some of the things that I've been through, so I'm pretty happy about that. But this is a big truck, needs to say, and it's not the most popular thing for overlanding. I built this truck with the in mind of like being out west hunting and doing overland trips and things like that, you know, kind of where it's more open, but it is and it isn't out there. So you have these wonderful things called shelf roads, and big trucks like this do not fare too well on shelf roads, and you know, things like switchbacks and all that goodness. So today we're going to play a little what if. What if back in 2021, so almost 3 years from about now, instead of ordering this Ram 2500, I went and got a Jeep Gladiator. So my good buddies at Lakeshore Chrysler in Montague, Michigan are going to hook me up. So they gave me a little toy to play around with for the day, and we're going to do some comparisons. So prior to getting the Jeep Gladiator, we're going to be doing I'm going to show you guys kind of like some perspectives from my current rig. So a couple things that I'm worried about at the moment. Obviously the biggest one is size, right? Going from a Ram 2500 where I have all the space in the world to a Jeep Gladiator, which is a mid-size truck. Yeah, I'm a little worried about cargo space. I'm worried about like comfort in the cab type of deal. So this is what it looks like from my rough perspective when I'm driving in my truck. So from my point of view, this is roughly about where my head is. So hopefully you guys can kind of get a good idea. I know I don't have a wide lens on this camera, but just how much room I have in this truck. Tons of space, you know, I got room for all my crap. And the interior is pretty nice. It's leather interior, a little soft touch leather. Yeah, tons of room. Not really any kind of mounting space. They don't really make a ton for this, but they're starting to. But got the big 12-inch screen there, and cluster's got a bunch of data on it. And yeah. Alright, so she's mine to play with for today. So what I would like to do here is pretty much do a little comparison of size difference wise. So we're going to go through like the cab, the bed, while I got here, because obviously that's going to be staying here at the dealership while I'm out playing around with this. So let's get into it. Now obviously you need to kind of not taking into account the fact this is a pretty heavily modified Ram 2500. So just kind of looking at the front, yes, I know it has a little bit of a lean to it. It's something I gotta get fixed on her, but you can tell obviously this is a big truck compared to something like this that's much smaller, so a lot smaller of a profile when going down the trail and things of that sort. Now I've also parked these kind of where I would be sitting parallel to one another, so even though the Ram's a little bit behind, obviously it's much bigger. Lengthwise really isn't too terrible between the two. It's more so the width and just the size wise. So looking into front seat here, obviously I have a bunch of crap in here, but fully adjustable seats, like I kind of mentioned earlier, leather, soft touch interior, kind of all the nice little things. This feels like a truck, obviously. Going into the back seat, there's not a ton of room back here, but I mean, it's pretty decent space. I have sat back here, not for a very long time, but it's not something I would want to do like a long trip on personally. But you know, works fine for the little one, and when I do have people going around the state or whatever. Now moving on to the Gladiator, obviously much smaller in here. This is a Rubicon, has cloth seats. It's not as much techie stuff, obviously, but we'll kind of get into some of the stuff that the Jeep has a little later on. So the back seats, comparatively, honestly, not too far off from my truck. Now, obviously, you probably don't have the most amount of legroom here. It would definitely not be comfortable for someone, let's say, my size of 6 foot to kind of be in all day or for an extended trip, but I think like kids would be fine, things like that. Obviously these seats can fold down versus mine that kind of fold up, then have a little platform here, so that can be nice for hauling around like gear and pets. I'm a big pet guy, so you guys know I love to bring St. Bernard and German Shepherd on trips, so I think they would be okay back here if it was just them. Now, as I mentioned before, the bed space is one thing that I know I would much have, or would have. I would have a lot of problem with the bed just because of how much smaller this one is. Now, obviously I have my custom topper on here, but you can see I have a bunch of stuff in the bed. And we'll be doing some more stuff with the Gladiator a little later, but with the topper, I have so much room in the bed of this truck. It's insane. The amount of gear I can fit back here is more than I'll probably ever need to. And I can actually sleep back here because I've done it, and that's kind of my current setup until I get my rooftop tent. So obviously the bed of the Gladiator is not the biggest. There's not a whole lot of stuff you're going to put back here. Granted, if I had a topper like I do on that thing, you could probably double, honestly, the amount of space that you could have back here. So I think if I did something like that, you know, which if I did do a Gladiator, I would kind of set it up similar to how I have the Ram. I don't think it would be that bad, honestly. It would definitely be a lot easier to reach in and get stuff from the side versus that thing. I keep a step stool in there for a good reason, because the camera is about my head height, and you can see even my little hatches here. You gotta get my little step stool out. Probably not just, well, I blame the 40s, honestly, but even then it's still a big truck. Like, getting up in here to reach is kind of a pain versus this. Even I'm sure after it's lifted, you know, I have plenty of room. All right, so now it's time for the fun part. We're gonna go drive this puppy, and I'm not gonna do any off-roading, obviously, because the dealership is being oh so good to me and letting me do this video, which this video is in fact sponsored by Lakeshore Chrysler. So if you are in the market in West Michigan area for any kind of stuff like that, any kind of those vehicles, they're definitely the people to take care of you. They have very much so taken care of me with this truck. I did order this truck through this dealership. It came pretty quick, which I was honestly surprised of. I think I got really lucky with that, but the whole process was super smooth, and these people know what they're doing. They have worked on this truck, even with all the stuff I've done to it, so it's definitely the place you want to get your next vehicle from. All right, so first thing I would like to address, and I'm sure this is going to come to a shock of no one, is holy crap, this cab feels small. Again, in my truck, like, I have all the room in the world. On long trips, it's phenomenal because I can really stretch out and I can adjust myself a bunch. I feel like if I was taking a long trip like we did out in Wyoming, probably wouldn't be the most fun in this, I don't think. With that being said, we'll kind of talk more about that Wyoming trip a little later, because right now I'm gonna go drive this thing and have some fun. This definitely feels like I'm in an off-road vehicle versus my truck. I just feel like I'm in a truck, you know what I mean? Even with the amount of crap that I've done to this thing, like, I still just feel like I'm driving a normal truck. Like, it's, the feeling of it has not changed from bone stock to how it is now. Yeah, it rides a little smoother, but like, it still just feels like I'm driving like a nice truck. Let's get on the road. I'm also not used to not having my little shifter stick. I like my shifter stick, but I mean, not a whole lot going on. The buttons is kind of nice. I do kind of miss that from versus like mine's all touchscreen. So, which this even does have a little Uconnect, which is pretty cool. I do like the little display. I kind of like the full, like, electronic display. Gauges are nice, but honestly, I just kind of use that the entire time in my truck. Steering wheel's pretty nice. Just, yeah, I mean, the visibility out of this thing is, man, I could really see all kinds of stuff from, like, out on the trail. Versus, again, my truck, it's like driving a boat. I can't really see anything out of that truck, so that's why it's got a brush guard. So unfortunately, this is not a gas version of the Gladiator, because in my little thinking of if I was going to get one of these, if I would get the diesel, which is what this is, versus the gasser, the reason why I would do the gas engine is because it's proven, it's been around for a while, it's pretty reliable from the things that I hear, but also just because I think a little bit more outside the box. You know, if when I do these vehicles, like, you know, thinking about the build of my truck, and then if I was going to build a Gladiator out, one thing I'm kind of thinking about is like, okay, if I'm in BFE, how accessible are parts, right? Now, obviously, if you're in BFE, you're not going to have a dealership that you can just walk across the street and go get the things you need. But let's say that I am, you know, out in BFE and I have some kind of an engine issue or a transmission issue or whatever, and it does have to get towed to the closest dealership. What's the probability of them having parts there, you know, to where I'm not having to now delay my trip for weeks on end, you know, to where then I would have to like fly home or whatever. But I think that the diesel doesn't have that, right? Like, there's not a ton of these diesel Gladiators out there, so there's not going to be like a ton of parts availability. So, you know, with the gas one, they're everywhere. They're in a lot of different vehicles that Chrysler has, so chances are they're gonna have the parts that you need, or be able to get them relatively quickly, I would think, or even just like going to some like an AutoZone or whatever, having the parts available there. Kind of same thing with my truck, right? The Hemi is not the most popular version or engine I should say, that goes in that truck. It's the Cummins, because obviously with 2500 they're meant for towing, they're meant for working, which is the complete opposite of what mine's used for. Mine is just used for play at this point. But yeah, so I would definitely personally do the gas version. Now, of course, the good thing about the diesel is fuel mileage, right? Of course, kind of comparing the gas and diesel, price-wise, is it worth it? One reason, at least in my truck, why I went with the diesel is because I wanted that torque. I wanted to try to maintain the highest possible MPG, which, you know, stock, I think it was like 23 highway, and I have been able to get 21 going out west. Granted, that was driving 65 miles an hour, but, you know, considering the amount of weight that truck carries daily, I think the fuel mileage is pretty good on it, honestly. So that's one thing that I was pretty happy with. And I'm sure the diesel Gladiator would be kind of in that same category, where for how much weight that it's carrying, you know, it's going to do better with fuel mileage and torque and things like that. Granted, this is not the biggest engine, so there's that. Also, it's heavier, right? Same thing with like my Cummins. It's much heavier than the gasoline engine that is offered in these vehicles, so that's going to cut on like your payload, which, in, you know, my aspect, because I don't really tow trailers ever, that's kind of what matters, right? So being able to have as much payload as possible is good, especially in my opinion on a mid-size, where I feel like the numbers kind of count more, you know what I mean? Like that truck, my truck, is just an absolute workhorse, so all the stuff that I've done to it, like, it doesn't care. It doesn't care that it's got full front bumper with brush guard, a full swing out steel rear bumper with a 40 on it. Doesn't care that the 4Ds are on it, and, you know, just kind of things like that. So I think it would definitely affect the diesel Gladiator if I was to go like, let's say 37s, and then I wouldn't do obviously a huge bumper on this thing. I would kind of do the stubby, but I'll talk about kind of how I'd outfit that a little later. So I wanted to take this way home specifically because it's like windy roads. There's some hills that I just went up a decent little incline of a hill. I was kind of surprised, even with the diesel, like, kind of not having to like give it the beans, you know, but like I had to push on the pedal a little bit, and, you know, even at like the weight of my truck, the diesel in that thing is just has so much torque, and having like you know, even with the heavier tires, still doesn't have a problem like getting up that hill. But that was kind of a slow process. Maybe it's because I just, obviously I'm not like familiar with this vehicle, so I don't want to throw anything out, you know. The fact that this is all kind of not like new to me, because my wife did have a Wrangler for a few years, and I have driven that a little bit. I actually have taken that thing off-road also, so I do have a little bit of experience in that. Granted, it was nothing crazy, it was just kind of some normal trails and stuff, and I would love to take this thing off-road. Jesus, son. But obviously, because it's a dealership vehicle, I am not going to do that. I've also have a buddy of mine that has a Wrangler that I've driven to, things like that. So both those were the gas versions, they were not the diesel, just to clarify. I don't know if that matters to anybody, but so far on the roads here, I have managed to kind of get the seat to where it actually is comfortable. Now, would I want to do it on a long road trip somewhere? I don't know. I feel like that's something I'd have to kind of do to get a good feeling with. It's definitely more comfortable now, because before I didn't really know how to set the seat up, because, you know, at least with my truck, it's got a real easy electronic switches, where this one's all kind of manual, which kind of surprises me that they are still manual, but, you know, it works. Figure it out. So not the worst seats in the world, but I think more so me getting used to just the smaller cab. Like, this is significantly smaller than my truck, and even for kind of a taller, bigger dude, you know, it's like I said, I managed to get it to where it's comfortable. Would I still be saying that after, you know, 6, 8, 10 hours of driving? I don't know, maybe not. Also, kind of just looking around this thing, the amount of storage in here is not very great either, obviously, right? In my truck, I have this huge middle console that's got all kinds of storage. So that would be definitely an adjustment too. But I'll kind of talk about the size stuff a little bit later. Alright, so now we are in my driveway with the Gladiator, and we're going to address one thing that really concerns me, and that would be space for stuff. So, kind of going off of the video I'll put up here, pros and cons of full size. One of them was size is a pro and a con. And that being, with a bigger vehicle, there's more room to just, throw everything in there, no big deal. Versus something like this, you definitely need to kind of pick and choose what you bring and kind of make sure that your gear is a little bit more, I guess, space friendly. I don't know, better storage option stuff versus just, you know, throwing in like a whole table in the back of my truck. So now I'm going to end up putting some of the gear that I usually bring camping in the bed of the truck just to find some things, and inside the cab. So this is pretty much all the gear that I bring camping with me, not just camping. I also threw a couple extra items in here for if I was going on like a hunt. So I have a rifle case, bow case, and then obviously if I had a topper, you know, I could even stack stuff up more. That's pretty neat. So I got two of the bigger Milwaukee pack out boxes, my little table, chairs kind of back there, my really big pack out box, bow case, rifle case on the other side, water, sleeping bag, grill, air compressor. I would probably have one like under the seat, but I just wanted to kind of, you know, utilize all the space. And then this is a bag that I keep in the back of my truck. You know what's got in it? It's got stuff. It's got cool stuff in it. Anyway, so this has actually a decent amount of space if I fold the seat down, and then even some more room down here. It wouldn't fit on the floorboard, but I mean, that's fine. Pretty decent amount of room right there, and then you could put a car seat on the other side still. I don't know if they make like a back panel for this, but that'd be pretty nice, or like a panel that goes kind of up this way. There is a little bit of storage back here and by the other. Let's see if I can get that to focus. There we go. And then there is some extras on the other side too, but I mean, there's a surprising amount of room, you know. Even if I did want to just throw that in the middle, you know, and put the seat. Oh, these come up too. I didn't even realize that. There you go. You got all kinds of storage under here. You could fit all kinds of goodies. This probably has more internal storage than my truck, honestly. The back seats, but move that out of the way. Wow, that's kind of nuts. Yeah, you could totally fit all kinds of goodies in here, or if you just wanted to throw some stuff, you know, on the seats like that. It's a pretty good sized duffel bag. Let's see how much room's on the other side. Yeah, that's a decent bit still. Kind of funny, we have this Jeep stroller for Ivory, and we no longer have a Jeep in the driveway. So I was actually really shocked by that. I was not expecting this thing to have that much bed space, I guess. I know from just walking around in like dealer lots, when my truck's getting worked on there, I went and looked at these and just kind of thought like, there ain't no way. Just looking at the amount of space that's in the bed, but I mean, you guys just seen it. That's pretty much all my stuff, and I'm sure, kind of how I mentioned earlier, if I did have one of these, my setup would be much different from what it is right now. just because, again, with having such a large truck, I just kind of tend to not worry about the size and weight of things and chuck it in the bed, and you know, because I have all that room. So now kind of one thing for my outdoorsmen, I think having one of these, like out on a hunting trip, would be fine. I don't think that being able to put something like an animal in here would be a huge issue. With that being said, kind of going back to the Nebraska hunt that I did with me and Joey, yeah, the bed of my truck was really full, but I feel like we also did bring a lot of unnecessary things. We had this huge cart that was really bulky and really kind of took up a lot of the space. The setup, if we had our sleeping arrangements, was kind of weird too. Like if we had my topper and a rooftop tent, I think that would have been a lot better, because of having that skinny guy prototype. Really, we kind of lost a lot of space in the bed, so that made it look a lot tighter than what it was. But I mean, if I had to throw like my big Yeti or my big fridge in here, plus like gear and stuff, I really wouldn't have an issue, I don't think, if I went with like, you know, the topper setup like what I was mentioning. And as far as like space on the inside, I mean, I wouldn't want to sit back here. It's not horrible. Like, it's not horrible. My knees are hitting this, but this seat's kind of back a little bit. I mean, if I was going like somewhere with friends, I don't think this would be the worst place to sit. I definitely wouldn't want to be stuck back here for like hours and hours on end. I also think too, I didn't really realize how much extra space you can get storage wise back here. Like even in my truck, there really isn't a ton of storage, so I honestly kind of lose out when I have stuff like this big bag, a car seat. Like I wouldn't be able to put little stuff. Like that's a ton of room under there. I mean, look at that. That's a lot of room to put some stuff. There's not really a ton of storage behind these rear seats, as I showed earlier, but I mean, you could easily fit like maybe some straps, or I don't know, maybe some like recovery gear, stuff for the wintertime you might need. Not really a ton going on back here, but again, like probably not going to be hauling too many people back here, and if you do, they're probably little people, or like in my example, my dogs. But yeah, that's not bad at all. All right, so now I kind of want to sit and talk about some of the different things that really kind of made me start thinking about getting a different rig, and some of the comparisons between some issues I think I'd have between this and the Moose build. Now again, just FYI, I didn't buy this Gladiator. It's only a loaner. It's not the way I would build one out. Kind of an issue I have is I'm very picky with things. So I would definitely be building one from scratch, and it would have to kind of fall within some very specific parameters. And I mean, when I built my truck out, I spent months on the builder trying to figure out exactly what I wanted, doing a bunch of research, seeing like what some of the differences are, and you know, kind of all that technical stuff. So I have played around in the builder a little bit with these. But again, until like I think to test drive one, you don't really know what you're looking at. It always helps to have like buddies that have these vehicles too and have some experience with them. So starting off, size of the cab. So relative to the size of the truck, the size of the cab in my Ram 2500, yes, the front seats are pretty good size, what you would expect. The back seats are not. Yeah, again, they're comfortable to ride in, but the space, there's not really a lot of space. And they do have this cool thing where you can fold like the bottom seat up. There's like a little platform that pops out, but I also have these gear panels on the back of my seat, so that kind of really limits how much I can put there. And when we had Ivory's car seat rearward facing, that really took up a lot of room too, and there wasn't really a ton of space for extra gear. You know, there's no storage like behind the seats. There is on the one side of the 40-60 or the 40-60 split, to where you can have a little bit of storage, but it's nothing like what this kind of seat has. The other side is pretty much taken up by the subwoofer that's in there. But I mean, it's a very comfortable truck to ride in. I've been in 10-hour drives, 11, 12. I think the longest was 16, and you know, it's just comfortable. The seats are great. There's a ton of space in there. I can kind of stretch, move around, do that kind of thing. Although I did get the seat comfortable here to where I didn't feel so cramped. Also coming from that truck to this, I don't think helps, but it was able to make it comfortable to where I was like, okay, I could definitely do some little bit longer drives on this. Now, could I do like 10-hour drive in it without feeling it? Maybe not. You know, that's something that I'd have to kind of do to really kind of make that assessment. But I think if this was my vehicle, I could get to the point where it was comfortable for me. As I mentioned earlier, when I would get my truck worked on at the dealership, I would kind of walk around the lot and I would look at these and look at the bed and just think to myself like, dude, there is no way that I could do this. And one reason I wanted to have it here is so I could try it out. Granted, it's not all my overlanding gear, but just kind of thinking about how I would set this guy up, which would be similar to the Ram. There would be obviously some differences there, but I would still have like a topper and things like that. But as far as bed storage kind of stuff goes with a rooftop tent on top. But I was really surprised how much stuff I was able to put in the bed of this. And that was with the mentality of, I have all the space in the world and I can just kind of chuck stuff in there. I'm sure, again, if like I own this rig, I would really be able to shrink the stuff that I did need and didn't need on a trip. Not to mention too, like as I mentioned earlier, the inside of the Ram really doesn't have a lot of storage relative to just like throwing things on the seats. So with the amount of storage, I'm sure I could really kind of, you know, narrow down on the amount of stuff that was in the truck, especially on bigger trips like that. And it's definitely not a fun thing. There's a reason why I have to carry a step stool in the Ram, not just because of how big the truck is, but when things are kind of sliding up to like the cab, you pretty much have to get in the bed of the truck to get anything, even at stock height. I mean, the bed of those trucks are just so huge. You pretty much got to have a step stool to get in and get whatever kind of items it is. But you know, we have a system with that and it works. I'm sure if I had this thing completely decked out, you know, I would still find myself jumping into the bed to reach something that slid up towards the cab. Even though you might be able to get it from the sides, which is kind of, you know, how narrow the bed of this truck is. And especially if I had it set up with side access topper, I'm sure it'd probably be a lot more manageable than my truck. So this is always something that could vary quite a bit, and that is a range. So as I mentioned, if I was going to get one of these, I would get the gas version. And of course, when you put suspension, bigger wheels and tires, you know, tent, topper, all the fun stuff that you bring overlanding with you, or off-roading or whatever you're doing in the outdoors, it's going to hurt your fuel mileage, especially with a gasser. When I had my Rebel, I really didn't do a ton to that, but when it was loaded down, you could feel it. It really killed the fuel mileage. And even going from the stock 33-inch tires to 35s, I mean, that really killed the fuel mileage. Versus like in my Ram, I went from the stock 33s all the way to 40s, and it really didn't, yeah, it hurt the fuel mileage, but not much at all. And the fact that I've been able to have the truck weighing 12,000 pounds and getting, you know, almost 22 miles a gallon highway, I think that's pretty insane. And probably the reason why I wanted to go with the diesel on that. But with the Gladiator, I kind of mentioned already why I wouldn't want to go with the diesel on that. So I think range And of course, you obviously have the fuel cost of diesel versus gas, right? Diesel's obviously more expensive, usually about $1 more expensive. Granted, with this, you really don't have that big of a fuel tank. Of course, I would probably have to get a bigger fuel tank, really it's a longer range fuel tank for this. But like the range on the Ram, even with the stock, I think it's 36 gallon tank, you know, I can get easily, you know, almost 500 miles on a tank, even if I'm overlanding and stuff. So depending on the terrain, if I'm doing a lot of steep stuff, steep climbs, stuff like that, even like 400, you know, that's still a lot of good range versus, you know, if this was a gas or stock, I don't even know if it would get that normally. As an overlander or an outdoorsman, you tend to throw a lot of crap in the bed of your truck. And an overlander, you tend to throw a lot of crap on your truck. So, kind of another reason the payload on the gasser is better than the one on the diesel here. But no matter what, I could probably fit this truck in the bed of my truck and go do stuff with it and be fine. Granted, the only time I've ever really pushed payload was on my Wyoming trip when the truck was weighing 12,000 pounds, and probably a little over 1,500 of that was just the skinny guy camper that I had in the bed of that. And even then, you know, with all the extra gear and the steel bumpers and the spare tire and all that kind of stuff, it really adds a lot. Granted, I don't think I would have too much of an issue. Obviously people load these things up, you know, overlanding, and don't really have that big of a problem. So, but if you're somebody that uses a truck like a truck, and the fact that you do a lot of truck work with it, hauling, whether it be like dirt, stones, you know, tons of heavy equipment, if you're, you know, that kind of thing, which granted you could always get a trailer and put all that stuff on too, so there's that factor as well. But I think it's like an overlanding aspect of it. I think you'd be fine either way. Obviously with the Ram you have a ton more, so you get into that issue again where it's just like, yeah, I'm just gonna throw stuff on, not really care. So options, right? The Ram 2500 is built to be a work truck. It's not really meant to be a play truck, kind of how I have it set up. So it's not really much of anything as far as off-road options in those vehicles from the factory versus like the Jeep. Obviously this is a Rubicon, so this sucker is absolutely loaded on, ready to go. You know, I have literally watched a dude buy a Rubicon Gladiator from the dealership and immediately go on a trip throughout Colorado and into Moab and do some pretty gnarly stuff with it. So they are very much winning in the category of the fact that you can get a Rubicon off the lot and just go party. Versus in my truck, I did do that after swapping out. Really, I just put the 40s on. I still had stock suspension and a bed rack pretty much. That was not fun, especially when you're driving with people in Tacomas that like to drive fast. But the Ram definitely required a lot more aftermarket support to make it what it is today. And that also kind of rolls into the next category of, you really, like with these, you really don't have to put it, if you buy a Rubicon, you really don't have to put a ton of money into these things to like really be able to go party. My truck, I don't know how much money I've put into it. I know it's a lot. I could tell you what like stuff is individually. For example, just my suspension system cost 12 grand, and that's not like labor, that's just the parts and everything. Granted, it is a very capable truck. You know, if I would have took that 12 grand that I put just in the suspension of my truck into like a new Rubicon, like that's a lot of stuff. And just not only talking about general maintenance costs, diesels are obviously more expensive than gas vehicles, but just thinking about all the money that I spent on fuel, you know, just driving around town or driving to events, work, you know, stuff like that. That cost in itself is relatively more expensive than having like a gas vehicle. And of course too, like the aftermarket support of these things is unbeatable. Like Jeeps have the best aftermarket support, period. They're true tested, and there's so many different things you can get for these vehicles. It's unreal. Granted, I debate all the time if I would do like 35s or 37s. Probably would start with like 35, see how that goes, and maybe upgrade down the road. But I mean, really, these things are just capable from the factory. It's pretty nuts. You really don't have to put a ton of money into these things to really go party. So speaking of the builder, I did kind of play around on that a little bit, just kind of to see what the cost would be if I did order one new. Of course, now it's a little weird because now is about to be 2024, and about 3 years ago roughly is when I ordered my truck. So the price on that vehicle, the build sheet, was 80 grand. The price that it turned out for if I were to build a Rubicon today was 72 grand. So that's quite a bit. I think the window sticker on this particular one's like 62 or something like that. But again, like, how much money that I've put into my truck already, if I would have taken all that, right, rewind, if I would have just bought a Gladiator Rubicon and taken all that money and put it into that, like, holy crap, that'd be one heck of a capable Gladiator. So this is going to be kind of a hard one to picture, but one thing that I really do not like about my truck is how comfortable off-road it is. That's not to say that, like, it doesn't ride well or it doesn't perform well. Like, it's very comfortable inside. You know, the truck performs amazing. But what I'm talking about is every time me and Joey go off-roading, which he's got a Wrangler, Jeep Wrangler, 4-door. He is cruising through the trails, you know, making it look easy, and he's smooth riding, right? Versus me, I'm way behind him doing all this because I can't, like, the visibility aspect of the truck sucks, obviously, right? The only saving grace is because I have a brush guard on my driver's side, I can actually see, like, where the front of my truck is, almost like on a snowplow, how it has, like, the, you know, things you can see where they are. It's kind of like that.
The life of a full-size Overlander.
Like, when I was down in Kentucky, for example, you know, I purposely put myself very last in convoy because I know I was going to be much slower going than everybody else. And if you watch that video, which I will link up here, there's a certain spot where I had to make a bypass because I couldn't fit under this tree. Now, there were also a couple of places where I was so close to either edge of the truck, again, just due to the size of it. And yeah, I've kind of grown used to it, you know, having done it now for 3 years. But the one time where I took my wife's Wrangler off-road, I was amazed at how just, like, man, you almost feel so carefree because I don't have this giant boat that I'm shoving through the, you know, woods all the way. And again, like, I don't care about pinstripe scratches. The truck has a ton of that. The paint hides it pretty well. But what I'm talking about is just kind of being that guy that's always the slow going one, you know, which usually I'm pretty fine with. But like, it's not fun. It can, if you're somebody who worries a lot, like, getting a full size and off-roading with it is probably not the best idea, because again, I've been in places where on either side of the kickouts of my bumper, like, there was probably about an inch between, like, trees and stuff. You just kind of have to be a lot more careful with it. And mentioning earlier, going out west, yes, you know, more open out there, but it also isn't at the same time because you have things like shelf roads. And if you encounter, like, snow on shelf roads or like a mudslide or whatever, down obstacles in the trail, you know, something like this is much more suited to deal with all that because it's thinner, essentially. So you really don't have to be as careful. you can definitely go more places with this than like what I could with my truck, even with how built out it is. These things are just so capable, and I mean my truck is too, but just the size difference, you know, there's a lot of places where I've talked to people where I'm like, oh yeah, I'd really like to go there, and they're like, dude, there's no way you'll fit. Again, them knowing that I'm not afraid to like get pinstripes and, you know, shove my truck in places. I have plenty of times of doing that, and really I'm just kind of limited by the size of my vehicle, and weight has something to do with that too. So there's a trip that I did last January, I believe it was January, February time. I'm doing some winter wheeling with some friends here, and my buddy in his Tacoma, you know, coasts across this area that, unbeknownst to me, was a mud pit. Because his truck was so much lighter than mine, he coasted across it. Well, me being the second one in the convoy, I did not coast across it. I sunk. And, you know, again, kind of being that guy, you know, which it was funny because they were all my friends, you know, so they're all laughing about it, making fun of me. And, but, you know, that stopped the trip. We had to stop and wait for me to get unstuck, which fortunately I got myself unstuck. I didn't need to like winch or anything like that. But, you know, I've had instances too where it's nice because you can break trail and stuff like that, you know. In Wyoming, we had a bunch of snow drifts across the road, and because I was much heavier than the other rigs, I just cruised through it, breaking up trail. The thing that I worried about, and it could have very much been a possibility, because the last two sections of the Wyoming BDR that we were doing, we had come across a group doing it in the opposite direction. And they had, it was a older Tundra with like an in-bed camper, and then like I think some Tacomas and a Jeep. They had 4 rigs too, just like us. But in our convoy, we had Patrick leading it in a Subaru. We had my buddy Scott in his Ford Ranger towing a trailer. We had my buddy Jason in his Nissan Frontier, and then we had me in the Ram. So I probably weighed almost as much as those 3 vehicles combined. And basically what they were telling us is that it is so muddy on those sections because they had gotten so much rainfall that they were constantly sinking up to their axles, and they were just doing recoveries non-stop. Had we have gotten in a situation like that, you know, if I would have gotten stuck up to my axles, I would be self-rescuing 100%. Yes, there are some situations where, you know, if maybe I just didn't have traction, they'd be able to like nudge me a little bit or maybe kind of help pull me. But if I get like stuck, like I'm gonna need another full-size rig to come get me out. Fortunately, the truck does have a winch on it, which I have used because I have gotten myself in a couple situations where, again, just not paying attention, and then there's a mud pit, and next thing you know, the truck is up to the axles, and it's just so the weight is kind of an issue there too. But mainly I'm talking about just the pure size of the truck. And in Michigan here, there's a lot of like really tight, we just call them Jeep trails, you know, because that's a big thing around here. So, you know, you've seen the size comparison earlier, so imagine, you know, my buddies who have brush hitting them on the side of their rigs, what it looks like on my end. So, which I'll put some videos up here, just so you guys can kind of see what I'm talking about. But so, fun part about thinking about a new build, right? You'll watch a lot of videos of other people's rigs to get ideas, and so I kind of have an idea of how I would build one of these out. It really wouldn't be crazy because, again, there's not like getting a Rubicon, there's not a lot you need to do to these things. Yeah, you know, get maybe like a 3-inch lift, you know, throw some 35s, 37s on there. If I went to 35s, I wouldn't regear, but I think if I went to 37s, I would. I can't remember the ratio. I think it was like 5/13s or something like that. But anyway, so this one has a little plastic bumper on it. I would order the steel one, and I would run just a stubby bumper for a while. I really like the looks of the stubby bumpers with the Jeeps. I mean, it's, you know, you can mount a winch in there. You gotta get a winch plate, but, you know, that's pretty sweet that it comes from the factory like that, you know. I had to buy a whole separate bumper to put a winch in my truck. And then kind of a topper. I don't know if I would do a custom aluminum topper again, just because of
time, and I know Jeremy is currently building a tray canopy system for his rig, which is going to be awesome. There is a certain Gladiator, there's a couple of them actually that I follow, Odin's Chronicle. It is the old Expedition Overland Jeep Gladiator that has like the flatbed canopy system, and that is phenomenal. I would love to do that. Even to my truck, I would love to do it to that. I think it would be even better with something like this, just because again, I was surprised how much stuff I could fit in here, and it just makes that even better. Plus, my big reason for wanting to do it in my truck is being able to open stuff from the sides and just get it like that, so I'm not having to constantly undo swing outs and things like that. It does have a little, side access, but I would definitely put a topper on something like this, whether it be like an RSI smart cap or whatever, and then a rooftop tent on top of that. I don't know if I would do another swing out. I would like to say yes, just because I don't like the idea of having a spare under the bed of the truck, because if I get into like a really wonky place, and let's say I'm like, up on a rock or something like that, I might not be able to get that tire out. Would have to like jack the back end up a lot, which wouldn't be the end of the world. I also don't like the idea of putting it in the bed, because then you're wasting bed space. So, which that's kind of, again, why in my truck I have a swing out. But yeah, that's kind of my two thoughts on it. Obviously, wouldn't need a ton of lighting for rigs and stuff like that. I don't have a ton of lighting on my truck right now because I'm always on the back, so not like I need a whole lot of lighting. So, but again, like it's just with these, there's not a ton you need to do to it to go party. So I think that's going to wrap this little video up. Again, huge thank you to the folks over at Lakeshore Chrysler for letting me test this guy out, drive it around, make some content with it. That's where I ordered my last vehicle from. It's probably where I'll order my next vehicle from. If you're in the West Michigan area, definitely check them out. Again, great customer support, and they'll take care of you guys for sure. We also have a Patreon now, so if you would like to fund the adventures and maybe a new rig, go ahead and get in the Patreon. Do some like exclusive content, some trip stuff coming up hopefully soon. Yeah, all that kind of fun stuff. Good little community. If you're into this kind of outdoor stuff, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. I would really love to have you on board here. Like the video if you thought it was good. Leave a comment if you have any questions. I do enjoy talking to people down in the comment section. That's always a good time. And as always, we'll catch you guys in the next one.